Hello and welcome back everybody to the Foodbuild factory, where today we're going to take a look at the monster of the Mire. That's the guy you can see on screen right now. And as always, I'm going to show you some gameplay in the first part of the video, and in the second part of the video, we're going to take a look at the perks, mutations, equipment, and everything else. So let's get right into it. What this character is going to be about, as you can probably tell already, we are going to play as a power armor character. And in addition to that, we are going to wield a harpoon gun. But we're not going to wield any old harpoon gun. It's actually a explosive version, which means that it is a legacy. Now, this is a bit of a special thing here on the channel. As you probably know, I'm not usually showing off legacy weapons all that much. I think this is actually the third time that happened. Um, and really only one other was noteworthy. I was making a video using an explosive cryolator once, and the other time I was using a black powder rifle with faster fire rate, so overall I would say that wasn't too exciting there. Really, this time around it's a bit more exciting, but still, um, usually what I want to focus on are, if I do legacies, I want to cover the ones that aren't really too much covered. Like, basically, with the nature of Fallout 76, pretty much every single legacy weapon has a ton of content made about it. But really, typically, when you see people talk about legacy weapons, we're talking about explosive energy weapons, and yeah, for the most part, explosive flamers, Gatling plasmers, or um, laser rifles. The harpoon gun, sure, it's well known, and a lot of people have used it in the past. But usually, people tend to not stick with it for the simple reason that it doesn't fire too fast. Now, the fire rate is definitely one big part of this video where I want to focus about, want to talk a little bit about, and actually correct myself uh, when it comes to videos I made in the past. Now, in the past, as you possibly know, I made quite a few videos using the harpoon gun. It's actually one of my favorite weapons in this game, despite by far not being the most powerful or anything. But it's just very unique, fills a very unique role when it comes to heavy weapons. I mean, nowadays we do have the plasma caster, but up to that point where the plasma caster was available, yeah, the harpoon gun basically has been. By the way, I'm just swapping in a power armor helmet that I have in my quick menu there, just so we can have a little bit of light. Didn't do too much here. Doesn't really help that it is purple, but yeah, I just have one in my quick wheel menu, as you probably know. It's not the best decision to use a standard helmet on the power armor, just because, yeah, you don't have access to any Pip-Boy light, unless you're using something like a not mole miner, but miner helmet or anything like that, miner head. Some of the helmets in the game do have their own kind of light, so that will work again. But anyways, I digress. Where was I? The harpoon gun fills a very specific role in that it is a slow-firing, hard-hitting weapon in the heavy gunner class, and basically the only thing you can use as a sniper, unless, as I said, you're talking about the plasma caster. But it's still a little different. And on top of that, I really love the visuals. I really like the wacky idea behind it and the way it feels. And this is one of those weapons where the explosive effect really helps in any single way. It really amplifies your power up to a level that's beyond, to be honest, like just on the top of my head. You're basically tripling your damage output. Something among those lines. I didn't really do the maths or anything, but yeah, just comparing any other old harpoon gun that was lying around in my stash with this one here. Once you have everything set up and going, talking about Demolitions Expert, and just quickly double check, yeah, I do have it here. Um, yeah, it has a lot of power. Now, another big thing is that the flèche mods, which basically turn this weapon into a big old shotgun. I have said in the past that they are kind of redundant nowadays. Like, back like half a year ago or so, um, it was definitely the best decision to go with the harpoon guns, with the flechettes, just because there was kind of a bug where you were basically looting more harpoons from your enemies than you were actually using to shoot them. So, it was just infinite ammo at that point, and that's basically it. But nowadays, yeah, usually the flechettes, they just you lose a little bit of armor penetration, not too much because you do have a good armor penetration perk, but still, it's overall less damage. Then, in addition to that, you do have a very harsh uh, ballistic curve. Is it a ballistic curve? You know, bullet drop off, where over a certain distance your bullets will just hit the ground, which is not exactly a common thing in Fallout 76 or Fallout 4 for that matter. Definitely doesn't happen with a lot of weapons. So that's something to consider. But that's not a factor anymore once you are having a explosive version of this weapon, which is basically one of the reasons why explosive doesn't drop anymore on this weapon. But in addition to that, yeah, similar to legacy laser weapons with the explosive effect, the explosive effect doesn't work like you would expect it on a, or I mean, you would expect just because you know, but usually what the explosive effect does, it adds like 20 or 25, I'm not quite sure, percent of your base damage onto your weapon, but as explosive splash damage. Back in the day when the game started and was released, it was 100%, which was already very powerful and was exceptionally powerful because on multi-projectile weapons like shotguns, laser rifles with the beam splitter attachment, or this gun with flechettes, this 100% damage from explosions basically got transported onto every single projectile, basically making it so you would deal like 8 times your damage or so. So it was kind of ridiculous. And yeah, Bethesda toned down on that, firstly by not making it 100%, but as I said, making it more like... We have another Scorch Beast here. That's kind of new. Well, actually on this occasion we are powerful enough to deal with that situation. And maybe that's a good... well, level 75 version also. Maybe that's a good situation to talk about. Another thing I wanted to talk about here, which is fire rate of the weapon, but okay. I think we can just leave that guy. Yeah, the fire rate of the weapon. But now that the situation has changed, we're going back to my other topic. Sorry. Yeah, the explosive damage. Now, long story short, this weapon still does get a lot of extra damage from the explosive effect, way more than any typical weapon. And yeah, just in case, I'm possibly missing it to show off later, but yeah, under full adrenaline and everything, this weapon does around 1,500 damage on this build. There's still room for improvement. Obviously, I'm never going to min-max to the fullest, as you will probably know. But yeah, still, it's tremendous damage output, and I would argue, now it's not that I did research on anything, but just from the top of my head, I'm pretty sure that an explosive harpoon gun is basically the most powerful weapon in the game for a single shot. Now, obviously not this one here, we're wielding a Junkies explosive version. I'm talking about something like a instigating explosive or bloodied explosive. I'm pretty sure in the right hands, this is most likely the way to deal the most damage in one single shot in this game at this point. I mean, technically, I guess a quad explosive Assaultron head could deal more if it wasn't bugged, but I digress again. Still, it's just a very powerful weapon. You will be able to one-shot pretty much every single enemy in this game, maybe two-shot. I mean, you oftentimes see that I'm not exactly one-shotting stuff, but let me show you one little trick here, which I included into the build, which is Formula P, which makes it way more powerful. Now, this was a little bit of a fluff here, just because I wasn't hitting the enemy low enough, I guess, so that the splash damage didn't really work out here. But using Formula P, you can actually increase the precision of this weapon, the accuracy, by quite a lot. And while in theory this doesn't boost your damage, it makes sure that if you're hitting an enemy, more of the projectiles actually hit, and overall you're usually dealing way more damage. Makes it also way more of a sniper, so if you want to do really take your time and snipe enemies off, this is the way to go. We will probably see that here on Hunt as well. Guess we can snipe off the super mutant on the balcony, or not really balcony, the upper level there. Uh, Pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, you can deal a lot of damage here. Also, what you would like to do if you really want to maximize it is basically make a stealth character in addition to using a bloodied build with probably instigating or a bloodied weapon, or maybe even nocturnal, obviously using it at night. But yeah, as you can see there, stealth definitely is something you can take into consideration. Now, it's never going to be stable, even with a full set of chameleon power armor, and even if you really um, build yourself for it. But to start off fights, especially if you can keep your range, it's definitely a nice option and makes sure that you can one-shot other enemies that you would possibly otherwise not one-shot. Now, on this occasion, some of our projectiles didn't hit the enemy itself, but rather went into that fence there. But I think you can tell the difference. That window there is actually just for show. It's not a real window in that sense. But yeah, the Formula P does work for like 10 minutes or so. So maybe by the end of finishing West Tech, you will see how we do against super mutants without it. So we'll have a good comparison here. And I think now is finally the point where I should focus on something I tackled earlier, just very briefly, which is fire rate of the weapon. And yeah, as I said, in the past, I did say some things a little bit wrong. When I used Harpoon Guns in the past, I can recall two different versions I was using. First one was a Medics version, which I was using in VATS, obviously. And in terms of VATS, one nice little thing you can do here is that, similar to shotguns, you do have a lot of projectiles once you are using the flechets, and that means you can get a lot of benefits from Fall Leaf Clover perk, meaning that oftentimes within a single shot you can refill your whole crit bar just by using Fall Leaf Clover. You don't need high luck or anything for it. And in addition to that, yeah, the Medic's effect was very efficient, obviously if you do a crit. So that was kind of cool. And the other time I was using it, it was a quad version of the weapon. That's hit chance, if I recall correctly, and really love the build. I really like that. It's one of my favorite casual builds to just roam around. But yet again, it is a VETS build. And one thing I did say in both parts is, as far as I recall, at least, is that in terms of fire rate, when it comes to the Harpoon Gun, you're kind of locked. Now, you would basically think that increasing your reload speed is the best thing you can do with this weapon, and somehow the weapon is a little bugged. I think it has to do with the actual fire rate of the weapon, which, as a single shot weapon, should be kind of irrelevant, just because you are limited by your reload speed. But what I think happens is that once you have reloaded, in terms of fire rate, you shouldn't be ready to shoot again once you're using reloads perks and everything. So you stand there with a reloaded weapon and can't really shoot. You have to wait for a second. That's how it was working when I was using it in VATS. Now, one thing is, though, that you can shoot basically as fast as you can reload the weapon. The thing there is you have a very limited window. So while the weapon is reloading, you want to start triggering your trigger, basically. Because if you're not pulling the trigger in the exact right moment when your reload is done, you will then have to wait for up to maybe 1 or 2 seconds, which is really annoying. So aiming during fights is more of a preparational thing, I would say. Like you want to have your aim done before your reload is done. So on this occasion, you want to just focus in on an enemy and constantly spam the trigger. Now, it's not like you can't really use the weapon without that technique, to be honest. It's just not for every game situation, I think. Like, if I'm just playing casually, I just don't want to constantly trigger my R2 button on PlayStation. And it definitely changes a little bit depending on the controller I'm using, so I have an easier time doing it on a PlayStation 4 controller that is still in use. But yeah, it is very easy to recreate, but on this occasion here, it actually didn't work. I kind of missed that point, and it seems like we hit a point where the weapon just keeps getting worse. For some reason, switching the weapons seems to work for me and makes it so I'm back to just constantly shooting the weapon. But that doesn't mean that going all in on reload speed is now the new thing to do, for me at least. And other than usually, I actually did quite an amount of testing on this topic, just because I was so interested. As I said, I was getting this wrong on multiple occasions in the past, so I really wanted to make sure that this time around I'm not talking bullshit. And so what I did is I was just going on a custom world, crafting a bunch of different versions with faster fire rate and faster reload, combination of both, and just shooting like 10 harpoons all of the time and stopping my time. And while obviously there was some differences here, we're talking about sometimes it was 23 seconds, sometimes it was 24 seconds. In general, I was getting a pretty consistently same result. And it was kind of interesting in a way because for me, using lock and load, the reload perk, actually made a huge difference. Like, we're talking a difference between, later on I was using just 5 shots just because it took so long. 5 shots with lock and load took me around 11 seconds, and without it, it took me around 20 seconds. Just constantly spamming the trigger. And yeah, other than that though, there really wasn't a big difference. Like faster reload and faster fire rate both didn't seem to have an effect on the weapon. I did get a better time on a anti-armor faster fire rate faster reload version 2 times in a row, but we're talking about half a second to a second. So really, if there is a difference, it's really not that noticeable. So overall, yeah, I gotta say, lock and load definitely yes for me. On outside of VATS, that is. In VATS, it still can work, but way more inconsistently. Outside of VATS, definitely I wouldn't want to play a Harpoon Gunner without lock and load. But other than that, I think there's no point in really looking for faster reload or faster fire rate. So, anyways, that was the gameplay part of the video. I hope you enjoyed it so far. I think the results kind of speak for themselves. Obviously, you do have still quite some limitation when it comes to your fire rate, especially noticeable once we're going against Scorch Beast and so on. But it really doesn't make this weapon not powerful, in my opinion. I very much like it. It's one of my favorite legacies in pretty much every single term. It's very ammo efficient. It is easy to farm ammo in daily ops. It is very powerful. It has good DPS still, just because the individual shots are so good. And after all, seeing as we done here, the reload speed isn't too crazy. And maybe let's just get my, where is it? My Centurion helmet back. And yeah, you can't damage yourself with this weapon. I mean, it was quite visible during the video. But using just fireproof is enough, so we don't hurt ourselves. Just make sure we are at full health so you can see that a bit more easily. Still at 100% here. You do stagger yourself, obviously, sometimes, but you don't hurt yourself other than with a Gatling plasma or so. And yeah, that's basically it. I hope you enjoyed it, and now we're going to take a look at the perks and everything. Starting off with the mutations. So, okay, not starting off with the mutations. On this occasion, I forgot we are using a Junkies build, so we're starting off with the addictions. We do have Colmex, Medics, Menteds, Overdrive, and Psycho. There's no real strategy to these addictions, to be honest. Just at the time I was using the weapon, I was just using chems I had in larger quantities, and simply put, on heavy gunners, unless you're doing some very specific ones, I feel like you have pretty much full on freedom to do whatever you like with your addictions. Um, there's not a single um, stat that you really rely on, and really for the most part, what debuffs are from addictions is um, to your stats. So as you can see up there, we do have a minus to perception, agility yet again, charisma, strength, um, one times more strength. All of these don't really change our gameplay. Now, the most noticeable ones for us will be minus 2 strength, just so we have a little bit less carry weight. But what is it, like 10 or 20 pounds? Doesn't really matter too much. Charisma, absolutely negligible in my opinion. Then we do have minus 2, or no, at all, minus 4 agility. Now, this would be kind of a bummer if you were using wets or if you were using stealth, but we don't do both of these. And same with perception. Perception is absolutely not noticeable at all for us because all it does is slightly increase our vet's accuracy. I think it still increases the range a little bit at which stuff appears on your compass, but let's be real here, that's not a problem. I mean, have you ever thought, man, I have to increase my perception just so I can see stuff on my compass earlier? I think you haven't. And lastly, we do have minus 20 damage resistance from the Psycho and Medic's Addiction, 10 each. Yeah, that's a spit on hot water, to be honest. Let's just look at it. We have 384 and 451, so yeah, that's nothing really. We do suffer from parasites, but now let's take a look at the mutations. To be honest, really, other than Speed Demon, nothing really necessary here. Bird Bones, it's nice to have when you are in power armor just because it reduces the amount of times that you will get into your stagger animation from falling down somewhere. And similar to my addictions, I didn't really bother to use Class Freak just because the debuffs, yet again, they do reduce our carry weight a little bit, but that's basically it. Now, Eagle Eyes is a leftover from another build, but I just didn't bother to remove it because typically on this build here, on this character, I always do Vets characters, and Eagle Eyes is one of the few ones that I can craft for myself. So yeah, removing it just so I can have 4 more strength during the video just didn't feel like necessary because we didn't really utilize the buffs from it. But yeah, other than that, it's just minus 4 strength for us. So electrically charged, that's a bit more convenient here. We do get attacked every now and then. It's just because we do have to reload a lot. There is time for melee attackers to get a hit in, and we do also have Tesla calls on our armor, just so we can deal electric damage to nearby enemies, and electrically charged just synergizes with that very well. It's never going to make or break the build, it's just not powerful enough, so in that case, but it's nice to have these visuals going off every now and then, I think, so yeah, it's there. And then we do have Marsupial, always nice to have, more jump height, a little bit more carry weight. I mean, not even slightly enough to offset the debuffs from strength, but I didn't really have a problem with carry weight to begin with here, so yeah, 20 more is okay. And lastly, we do have Speed Demon, and this is something I forgot when I was talking about my testing earlier. I did all of this testing with Speed Demon combined. So basically, long story short, Speed Demon and um, Lock and Loaded together seem to be kind of the limit of the weapon. Faster reload doesn't seem to do any more in terms of your overall damage output, and faster fire rate either. I mean, I wasn't really expecting faster fire rate to do anything, But the reason I was still testing it is that recently, kind of recently, a few weeks back, Bethesda, or more precisely the devs of Fallout 76, they removed a bunch of they removed faster fire rate from a bunch of weapons in the game where it didn't make sense. Talking about black powder rifles, for example, and the harpoon gun wasn't among them. So I thought maybe they know something we don't know, and maybe it does affect it. So my guess is that because the weapon can be quad, in that specific circumstance, a quad faster fire rate one would make a difference. Possibly. I have to test that out. Another video maybe, but or maybe not a video. I'm going to drop that info sometime in the future. Maybe once I'm making another um, harpoon gun video. But yeah, maybe you will never hear about it. It's probably not going to be too interesting either. So that was it in terms of my mutations and my addictions. Now let's move on to our equipment. And here you can see the bad boy. It's a Junkies Explosive Agility Harpoon Gun. I am basically pretty sure that this is one of the few legacies that I found myself. Now, correct me if you feel that this is one of the duped versions that's around, but for some reason I have a feeling that this was one of my first legacies ever. And yeah, anyways, doesn't really matter. Really nice weapon, as I said. Love the design, love everything about it. In terms of modifications, not a lot going on here. The flechettes, obviously, I talked about it during the video. While usually with harpoon guns nowadays, unless you're talking about very specific ones like vampires or medics, maybe, I would not advise you to use the flechettes, just because, as I said, they do have quite crazy bullet drop off, and in addition to that, just leave to overall a little bit less damage. Um, in terms of explosive, there's no way around it. This is what makes the gun so powerful, so use them. And in terms of a scope, you do have the option to go for none whatsoever, a reflex sight or a short scope. I went with short scope here just because, first of all, I think it looks kind of ridiculous, and I actually enjoyed myself sniping with this weapon quite a lot. So yeah, really going up to an area and picking off individual targets, especially once you're factoring in Formula P. By the way, seems to max out at 3 um, Formula Ps. Not sure if you noticed, but or known, but Formula P does stack. Not the VATS accuracy buffs and everything, but the actual accuracy buff, meaning that your spread is reduced with every single every single Formula P you take. So using 3, you will get a very thin point where your bullets will land. Sorry. And that makes it so you can really snipe very well. You can also crouch, stay hidden for quite an amount of time, as you saw during the video, despite not being made for it. And yeah, that makes it so you can one-shot high-level super mutants from afar and so on. Not too crazy, but definitely fun in my opinion. And now you'll see that just with the perks we are having and everything and the legendary effects and our mutations, we do have 1191 damage, which is kind of high. Um, and it's actually one of those weapons where this damage seems to be right. I mean, there's some weapons out there that seem to do a ton of damage on paper, but end up doing nothing, aka the Assaultron head. But yeah, this actually is a very powerful weapon in my opinion. Now, we do have a fire rate of 2. That's what I was mentioning earlier. I think that's so low that even if you can reload faster, the game kind of struggles because in terms of reload, you should be ready to shoot, but in terms of fire rate, you probably shouldn't. And I think that's where the problem comes from. Now, if you would say you make the fire rate like 20 or 200, it wouldn't really change anything just because you can shoot faster than you can reload it. But it would make it that, yeah, when once you reload it, you can actually shoot the weapon, and without it feeling awkward, or sometimes you're having this hanging animation and anything. You know what I'm talking about. I talked about it quite a lot. Now, one thing to mention is the range is definitely lower once we're using the flechettes, but on this occasion, it's worth it just for the explosive part of the damage. And yeah, let's move on here. We are going to take a look at our power armor, and it's not too interesting here, to be honest. We do have aristocrats with less explosive damage. We do have aristocrats yet again with extra AP refresh and reduced damage while blocking. Then we do have a Ghoul Slayer's piece with extra radiation resistance, a Zealot's piece with extra intelligence and calibrated shocks on it, and another Zealot's piece with AP refresh here and increased size of sweet spot while lockpicking. So overall, yeah, as you can see, pretty mixed matched set here. I just wanted to have a legendary XO1 set. The interesting part here is that I actually do have two pieces of AP refresh on power armor, which is where I'm going with this armor set over time. I really want to have a full set of XO1 with AP refresh. Could be very nice. I really would be interested to see what a full powered piece of power armor can do with the core assembly mod. But yeah, talking about the core assembly mod when it comes to the torso, as I said, we do have. Oh no, sorry, I forgot. We have no mod at all. The Tesla mod I was talking about earlier was just an experiment on custom worlds. Didn't really bother to use the flux just for a little benefit. Thought electrical charge did it. Just forgot about that. So yeah, as I said, Tesla coils could be cool here. To be honest, go for whatever you like. A jetpack is pretty cool on this build, just because, yeah, you can do some pretty cool trick shots since you're not really having to aim too closely. You can oftentimes, especially when it comes to ghouls or so, just spray the ground with a massive hip fire shot and kill a lot of ghouls. Can be very fun with a jetpack, but yeah, anyways. Only noteworthy thing here is we do have the Inferno skin, and just if you want to see it, this is the helmet that we were using. Really cool skin, by the way. You can get that from Daily Ops. So yeah, one of the better rewards, I would say. I just like it. It once originally was a um, Nuclear Winter reward, as far as I remember. So sorry guys for everyone who really worked their ass off in Nuclear Winter to get this by sitting in bushes for ages. But yeah, I got it from Daily Ops. And now let's take a look at our perks. We do have 14 strength, we do have 3 traveling pharmacy. It's just a given here just because I carry a ton of stim packs and mats and everything, chems on this character. If you're really limiting yourself to just the initial few ones that you need in order to get addicted, and afterwards just use Formula P, I would say ditch traveling pharmacy. It's not necessary at all and would leave you with, instead of rank 2 of every heavy gunner perk, rank 3, um, which would be quite nice, just giving you yet again more damage. So you can really double down on doing even more damage. I just thought it wasn't necessary here, and to be honest, I didn't really have a choice. So yeah, that's the combination we went with here. Then we do have lock and load. Talked a lot about it during the video, so I think we can leave it there. And lastly, we do have bandolier, which is important. Harpoons can be quite heavy. You can obviously craft like 100 a go, or 200, 300 maybe, and carry the burden. But to be honest, you want to have like 2,000 or more. And yeah, you can do that with daily ops pretty easily, and they tend to weigh a lot. So yeah, bandolier is here. Then we go over to perception. We do have sniper, which I wouldn't deem necessary, but it really improves one of the more fun aspects of this build here in particular, which I was talking about earlier, sniping, obviously, as the name implies. Um, just makes it so your controls are a little bit better. You have very limited sway when you're looking through the scope, which you can see here. And yeah, in addition to that, you can hold your breath longer, which basically makes it so you have no sway at all. That's a little bit unnecessary. We have pretty pretty good amount of action points, so that wouldn't be necessary, but still it's nice to have. And then we do have a surprise here, Green Thumb. Makes it so harvesting flora is twice as effective. Seems like a bit of a loss, but on the other side, it's just 1 perk point, and it really helps when you're trying to make Formula P. Really easy to farm, in my opinion. So what you want to do is you want to go to Lewisburg and get all the ash rose from the roofs. Should be around 11 there, which makes it so you have 22 ash roses once you go there. And then you want to use blood leaves. Those are kind of common. I personally go around go south from the Overseer's camp. The first one, where also the wavy willets, not wavy willets. Let me check. Sorry, the wayward. Sorry, I completely forgot here. Where the wayward is, you want to go south, following the river, and you find a lot of blood leaves. And lastly, you want to have kaleidopore pots. These can be harvested in Arctis Pharma, in the cellar, in the experimental area. These are these pink glowing flowers, and really the limiting factor here is the ash roses. There are some other spots in the world where you can get 2 or 3, but just visiting these 3 spots I just mentioned, you can get around with like 22 of each of the material pretty easy. And what you actually need is 2 kaleidopod flower, 2 ash roses, and 1 blood leaf, and 1 antiseptic per formula P. And yeah, it just maximizes the yield. So yeah, it's just there. Then we do have pretty high endurance at 12, so we do have Chem Resistant here, Chem Fiend, Fireproof, and Life Giver. Fireproof, not a lot to talk about here, reducing explosive damage. Always nice, but without it we would be kind of unstable, I would say, on this build, just because we would be killing ourselves all of the time. Then we do have Life Giver, just improving our maximum hit points. A lot of people say it's a waste of perks, just because it's 4 perk points for 45 hit points. It's not a lot, I'm not gonna lie. I often just like it because it doesn't need any specific circumstances or so. Then we do have Chem Resistant, which on first glance might seem a little bit lost here, just because we already have 5 addictions. What else could come here? To be quite honest with you, the reason was that I wanted to have 5 addictions, and the point was, sorry, Formula P. It was a chem I was planning to constantly use, and either I would have 6 addictions for most of the time, unless I'm using Formula P, or I would have 4 addictions and take that when I would have 5 addictions, and when I'm using Formula P, I will get a little bit more concentrated fire, but will get a little bit less damage, because from all I know, the Junkies effect doesn't work for. So let me put it other way. You get extra damage when you're actually under withdrawal from a chem, and even if you are addicted, when you are under the active influence of that chem, you don't have any withdrawal symptoms. So let's say you are addicted to Psycho, you do more damage with your Junkies weapon, but then you take a Psycho, and the damage buff from your Junkies effect, those 5% extra damage from that addiction, those are lost. Sorry, 10%. So yeah, that's the reasoning here. I wanted to have my 5 addictions, then get chem resistance, so I constantly have these 5, the extra damage from these 5 addictions, and can use Formula P without getting another addiction. And lastly, we do have Chem Fiend. This is kind of obvious. It just doubles the duration which our chems last, and that means Formula P lasts 10 minutes instead of 5, which is quite a good time frame. Like, this makes it really efficient to use it, in my opinion. It's one of the longer lasting chems, actually. Then we do have Tenderizer. To be honest, in most situations it's not going to be useful at all, because we're really built to one-shot most enemies. But once we're going against Scorch Beast, Cheap Squatch, you name it, this becomes very effective, because as with shotguns, as Tyr pointed out in the video, I'm going to say this for another 2 or 3 videos, but at some point I will not give shoutouts to Tyr anytime I'm mentioning this fact. Yeah. Tenderizer can stack up to do 40% multiplicative damage depending on the weapon you use. You want to use a multi-projectile weapon, and as long as multiple projectiles hit the enemy at the same time, explosion doesn't count, by the way, you can get up to 40% multiplicative damage after that shot, rather than the 10 that are advertised here. And yeah, with this weapon, that's the case. So fighting a Scorch Beast or anything, if you get a hit in, the next hit will do 140% damage, which is quite a massive increase. Then we do have Intelligence, which is at 15, rather rare. I mean, we do have a debuff from Marsupial here, but still, it's pretty good intelligence. We do a first aid here, most uninteresting perk probably, but it just makes it so if Born Survivor kicks in at 20% health, we can just clear all of our health back again with a standard stim pack. Even diluted stim packs at that point are pretty effective, so yeah, that just overall makes it so we can use our stim packs more effectively. Then we do have stabilized. It's kind of interesting on this weapon just because while stabilized is one of the best perks for a heavy gunner, if not the best one, it increases your armor penetration by 45% and your accuracy. On this weapon, it's not as necessary as on others, just because we're doing so many damage per shot. Even factoring in that we do multiple projectiles and every single one of them does not do the full damage, we still have pretty good armor penetration without stabilized, but you definitely see a difference once you're going against level 100 super mutants or up. And in addition to that, the accuracy is nice. Basically, I mean, we're using Formula P every now and then to decrease our spread on the weapon, and stabilized does that all of the time without any timer or anything. So yeah, it just doubles down on that. Then we do have batteries included. This is basically give or take. I wanted to have it just because I have like 30 fusion cores here. To be honest, this is one of these builds where one fusion core, maybe two, would last you pretty much forever, just because when we take a look at the legendary perks, we'll see that we have electric absorption there, and that makes it so unless you're using VATS heavily or you're making heavy use of the jetpack, you will not burn through your fusion cores too fast. So I did use batteries included here. The other option would be, in my opinion, to just carry two fusion cores and use batteries included. If that's the point, you'll basically never run out of them. It's just a weight reduction. Yeah. And then we do have Chemist here. Another one that seems a little lost at first, but it's the same reason as Green Thumb. Really, using Formula P was a very fun part of this build, in my opinion, and I didn't want to feel limited in using it. Um, After all, if you really want to get the best effect, you want to have three at a time, so you're consuming quite a lot when you do it. And I just wanted to have all the necessary perks in order to maximize my crafting for Formula P. And the reason here is I just am not a big fan of swapping in perks. Now, I obviously do swap in perks for when I'm crafting ammo, but that's just something I do relatively rarely. When I do it just in a big bunch. And the way I got hold of Formula Ps was I was just baking it in my daily routine, doing it whenever I felt like, okay, I hit the point where there's no interesting events to do at the moment or anything, and then I felt like, okay, now let's take 10 to 15 minutes and farm some stuff for Formula P. And really doing every 2 or 3 hours doing that run, I didn't want to swap in all these little perks here, and overall they don't do too much here. We're still only at 2 perk points, so I wanted to leave them in, and even though there are basically lost perks that way probably because you could just swap them in at the right place. I think like they give the build a little bit more character, and that's why I like to leave them in. I would actually wish that Bethesda had more of these little 1 perk point perks that actually make a noticeable difference. Then we go over to agility. I very rarely have low agility, but this would really be one of those perks where builds where you can get away with low agility. You don't need it for anything. You're not really sprinting. You're not really relying on dodgy to be too tanky. I mean, we do have dodgy in here, but it's not necessary. So you could justify going way lower here. I still found some use here though. Action Boy, just because I had some points left over, and faster AP refresh is always nice. This combined with the two AP refresh pieces on my armor makes it so dodgy is basically always in effect. Um, by the time we can, enemies can take some of our AP by hitting us. Again, I think it's a 2 second counter. In these 2 seconds, yeah, we do regenerate 30 action points again. So basically, dodgy is always in effect. Adrenaline, not necessary in the slightest here. We do have a very powerful weapon, but once it comes to super mutants, high level ones, if we're not getting our initial few stealth attacks in, we won't be one-shotting them. Now, as I said earlier, it still happens that you don't, just because maybe some of your pellets don't hit. But with this setup here, using 2 or 3 sneak attacks was pretty much always possible. At that point, we do have some adrenaline going on. Maybe focusing on 1 or 2 super mutants that are level 60, which at that point you can easily one-shot. And once that's going, you will also one-shot level 100 super mutants if you hit them in the torso, in the lower torso. Basically, aim at their crotch, and yeah, you will just one-shot those guys as well. It's just a little frustrating if you hit your enemy and it has just a sliver of health left with this kind of weapon, because you will then have to go through the reload, which, as I said, is rather fixed now, but still, you have to go through the whole process just to take another little bit of sliver of health away. So yeah, it's kind of tedious. Dodgy, I already mentioned it. Lastly, we do have Born Survivor, just a little safety net, as I always call it. Always want to have it in my build. Not always, but very often. Yet again, just one perk point of investment, but really helps me not worry too much about my health during fights. We are tanky enough so that even at 20% health, we usually aren't close to death. We still have quite a lot of time, or quite a few hits we can take before dying. And yeah, at that point, we will get a stim pack and we'll be healed back to 100% basically. Then we do have Luck of 8, we do have Bloody Mass, Starch Genes, and Super Duper. Now, this was a bit. This was where I was thinking a little bit. Not Starch Genes, this was kind of obvious. I had to take it. Want to keep our mutations, not get any new ones. Um, yeah, Bloody Mass. I was torn between using Bloody Mass and basically sparing points for One Gun Army. One Gun Army could be very interesting here because it has a cripple chance, and similar to Enforcer with shotguns, it does work very well on this weapon because it has multiple projectiles, so you have multiple times the, I think, 12% chance from the top of my head. But I just didn't feel like it was necessary. So even when I was fighting tougher enemies like sheep squatches and so on, if fights were long enough so that crippling the limbs was actually something I would consider, I was kind of doing that pretty fast anyways. So really 2 to 3 hits to the leg with this weapon, just because it has so much power per shot, um, actually seemed to do the job quite well. So at that point, I felt like One Gun Army would have been a little bit of overkill. And ultimately, Bloody Mess, while it doesn't seem like a lot, on this occasion it actually does quite a lot of damage. So let's just take it off real quick. Take a look at our weapon. We do have 1,106 damage. Just from earlier, I think Bloody Mess would be 90 more or so. So yeah, 80, 89 I think it was, or 82, 88 damage, which sure, compared to the rest of the weapon damage, it's not that much again, but these 80 damage basically made the difference between one-shotting certain super mutants and not doing it. Was just kind of coincidence, to be honest, that we fell into that exact point here, but yeah, I actually tested it, and therefore I decided for Bloody Mess. And yeah, lastly, Super Duper here. What a bummer to finish on this one, right? Um, Bet you never saw this in a build guide before. Super Duper is just one of these perks which basically everyone has lying around somewhere, but always only uses it when crafting. And pretty much everything I can say about Super Duper, I can say about is what was saying about Chemist and Green Thumb. This obviously is amplified up a little bit, so Super Duper is a little bit more perk investment, and there would definitely be other stuff to use. As I said, a one gun army would be nice, class 3 could be cool, but I wanted to go really down that route once I started with Green Thumb and Chemist. This, after all, is the least important one in my opinion, since you're not going to craft crazy amounts in one go, Basically, most of the time, what you're going to do is you're going to craft like 20, 22 Formula P after one single run. And so, yeah, super duper. Sometimes you get two extra ones, sometimes you get up to five or six. So it can be useful, but you can live without it. I left it in there and I didn't feel like I was underpowered at all. So, yeah, felt like it was justified. And that leaves us with only legendary perks, and this is one of the builds where it's kind of boring because a lot of them are just there for extra perks. And on this occasion, I actually think, yeah, every single one of them is there for extra perks. I don't boost any of my passives beyond 15. So yeah, every single perk point that is added here is used for some. Sorry, every little special point that's added here is used for some kind of perk. And the only other exception is electric absorption, making it so we have a 30% chance that enemy laser attacks or energy attacks can heal us and can recharge our fusion core. Recharging our fusion core obviously is a nice thing, but really it makes us really tanky in situations where otherwise we would be in trouble. Assaultrons basically become a joke. Um, a lot of basically every time you fight robots or super mutants, there will be a good chance that there's someone around using a laser rifle or so that's actually healing you. So overall, it just boosts your tankiness by quite a lot. And yeah, that was it. I hope you enjoyed it, guys. As I said, I'm not often using legacies. If you're interested in the kind of thing, just write me or comment down below. I do have quite a few legacies lying around. I just feel like there are more interesting ones to cover, like for example, a explosive laser or Gatling plasma. Just doesn't feel too interesting. Now I'm obviously liking the challenge to do something special with it, but even I have my limits. So yeah, what I personally would like to use, just because I can remember using one in the past, but I at that point didn't really get the full potential of it. Was a quad crossbow. That would be something I would definitely be down for. But yeah, other than that, let me know if you have any ideas for builds or anything. Want to see something? Maybe even a certain weapon you want to see, or a certain aesthetic I want to go for. Like challenge me with that. So yeah, see you next time, guys, and bye.